revolution can last without Terry Funk. It sure as hell can do without Cactus Jack.
Thank you, sir.
You seem like a very nice guy. Thank you.
It's all work, you know.
Thank you.
I'm not really the loose cannon. It's all just their perception of reality.
Hello, my name is Bob Bamber and welcome to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. We're going back in the time machine to March of 1996, Volume 3 of this month's show. Volume 1 is your WWF show looking at WrestleMania. Volume 2 is WCW looking at Uncensored. We're here in Volume 3 to discuss ECW. I'm being joined firstly by Rory McNamara. Rory, hello.
Hi guys.
And Steve Halvorsen. Steve.
Hey, how you doing?
I would ask one of you to kick off with the news, but we don't really have any, which is different, so I don't really know what to do here. But yeah, essentially, it's a fairly quiet month for ECW. Obviously, there's stuff that's happened on the shows and on the Big Ass Extreme Bash show that we're going to cover that we will get to. But in terms of news, not a lot, so we're just going to jump straight in, and the stuff that might have filled out a more newsworthy month in terms of the news section we'll just cover as we get to it. And there's a little amusing NWA story, but I'll cover that at the end. We will start, where are we going to start here? I haven't got that. We will start with the Hardcore TV on March the 5th. March 5th TV was basically a full rerun of the Too Cold Scorpio Sabu match from February that we covered on last month's show. Highly recommend watching that if you haven't seen it for all the reasons we discussed in February. Otherwise, and even then, I think they re-showed the Douglas Dreamer promo that I got a feeling aired in February as well. And they did their usual montage of promos at the end of the show. But March 12th from a podcast, March 5th from a podcast perspective, not a lot happened, except for two rather interesting Brian Pillman segments. Now, one thing we would have covered in the news if we had anything to cover is that Brian Pillman now has essentially left ECW, didn't wrestle a match, and you'll find out what happened, to him in ECW as we get through it. On his WCW part, he did appear on Nitro. They were billing him for Uncensored, and then he just never turned up. We will cover that in more detail, on the WCW show. But on Hardcore TV, on February the 5th, we open up, we walk into this, I don't know, someone's got a camera and they're on this kind of like this first floor of a house, and they walk through these through this doorway to the top of the stairwell, and they look down kind of on this, I don't know, reception area of some kind of house. And Pillman is there, and he is stood next to a 6-foot tall pencil. I wish I was making this up. And then for the next 30 seconds, Pillman proceeds to wrestle this pencil. Okay. And so we get the rest of the show. We see Too Cold Scorpio and Sabu and all of that. And then we get to the very end of the show, and we cut to the final clip on the show is Brian Pillman sat on a sofa wearing no clothes. Fortunately, the Johnson that he threatened to whip out on last month's show, he didn't show us. That was his modesty was covered by his left leg. So that happened. I think we'll cover all the Pillman stuff for the month and then discuss it all rather than do a bit of it now. I don't know whether I recommend going, because I would recommend watching the 5th of March Hardcore TV for the Scorpio Sabu match if you don't have access to CyberSlam the show. Whether, if you've already seen it, whether I'd recommend seeing Pillman grapple a giant pencil, and him wearing no clothes, probably not.
It's not really history-making footage, is it?
No, it's not. But anyway, we'll move on to something I've got scripted. We move on now to our coverage of Big Ass Extreme Bash. That was actually a 2-night show. The first night was held in New York, and I think the Lost Battalion Hall, and then the second night was held at the ECW Arena. If you want more reading on this pair of shows, Dave Meltzer does a big, long report. I think he was at both shows. In terms of what we're going to review, the tape that we've got has kind of probably 30 minutes of highlights of the New York shows. There's nothing really to cover beyond the opening segment, which does actually appear on the Hardcore TV that we'll review later. But we get the probably 30 minutes of the New York show, and then the bulk of the Philly show. A couple of matches are shown as clips, a couple of matches are shown slightly curtailed, and most of it shown in full. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge. The interesting kind of notes from Dave Meltzer's review of both shows, having been at both, was that the perception that the New York audience wasn't really prepared, ready, interested in the non-violent style of wrestling. Particularly when it came to the first of two Juventud Guerrero Rey Mysterio Jr. matches. They wrestled each other on both shows in two out of three Falls matches. And there's a few other things as well. But yeah, that was kind of the big takeaway amongst other things. And there was certainly, fans were expecting blood and weren't getting them. But that was night one. We'll review a couple of things from night one that appear on Hardcore TV later on. But we are here to review night number 2 in Philadelphia. And Rory, you can kick us off with the results.
Yep. JT Smith defeated Axel Rotten. Damian Stone and El Potro Ricano versus the Bad Crew ended in a no contest. The Eliminators defeated Bubba Ray Dudley and Hack Myers to retain the ECW Tag Team Championship. Rey Mysterio Jr. defeated Juventud Guerrero in a best 2 out of 3 Falls match. Chris Jericho defeated Taz by DQ. Cactus Jack defeated Mikey Whipwreck. The Bruise Brothers versus the Pitbulls ended in a no contest. Sabu defeated Big Titan. Raven defeated Shane Douglas to retain the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. And the Gangsters defeated the Headhunters and the Sandman and Too Cold Scorpio in a tag team 3-way dance.
Steve, what do you think of this show?
It was a great show. Really rated it highly. The fact that it was on 2 nights and we haven't seen absolutely everything on these tapes, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. And I also thought that having the two out of 3 Fall matches might have been overkill. But I mean, I guess we'll cover that when we go to that match. But that was probably the highlight for me, was seeing the Lucha Libre stuff, which I've not been following totally, over the months, but getting to see the stringing everything together, putting everything together was absolutely fantastic match. Really my highlight of the 2 shows. Also as well, we got to see the farewell of Cactus Jack as well, which is really emotional in terms of his speech that he gave. And then there's the Pillman factor that is throughout the month as well, which again we'll cover. But a great show. I really enjoyed it.
Rory.
Me too. I'm only going to talk about the Philadelphia show because we haven't seen enough of the New York one to talk about it here. And I'm not the world's biggest ECW fan, but I thought this was a great show. It was captivating from start to finish. Even the bad stuff, and there was some bad stuff in there, was kept reasonably short. The good stuff was extremely good, and the insane ECW stuff was insane ECW stuff. It all held together really well. Some stunning matches, a truly magical feel-good moment, and they can hold their heads up high for this one. Good stuff.
I wasn't quite as high on this show as you. I think my overall takeaway one was kind of being a bit... I felt the show didn't finish as strongly as it was in the middle, which I don't think helps, but also just being a bit burnt out on this arena-wide brawl style of match that I think that... Steve, this is the first ECW show you've done. Rory, this is the second. And I'm not saying it's the only ECW exposure you've had, but given that I've been doing ECW now for kind of, 2.5 years, you can get a bit burnt out on that kind of very exciting to watch from an arena perspective, but not the most fun to watch from a viewing person's perspective on video. That being said, I think Mysterio and Guerrero is phenomenal. Not the style I love, but I can at least admire and tell you how great it is and how much I think people listening are going to enjoy that match. The Cactus Jack thing was really, really well done. I thought that was a really nice way to end his run. And the Pillman stuff spread throughout the show. It did fizzle out. I admire Raven for going out there injured and working a balmy match, given that he wasn't really any state to perform. I think my bigger question surrounding that was whether he should have done. And one of my favourite moments of the show is what we're going to open up with. Here it is. It's with New Jack and Mustafa. Jerry Styles introduces the Gangsters, who are now being treated heavily by the ECW fans. A female fan goes after New Jack. Apparently it's actually his wife, and gets escorted away by security.
I never thought that I would miss nobody in my life. But to be honest, I miss these crazy, retarded
Jack said he never thought he'd miss anyone in his life, but he's missed these crazy, retarded motherfuckers in ECW. I'm losing my goddamn mind sitting in motherfucking Atlantic City jail for damn near 5 weeks when I should be beating the fuck out of somebody, and I've been sat looking at this motherfucking TV. They made me watch this bullshit WCW. I'm gonna tell you for real, I jacked off that night. Fuck Eric Bischoff. Fuck Vince McMahon. WCW may be where the big boys play, but this is where the real motherfuckers play. Out comes Damien Kane. Kane's promo gets drowned out by fans chanting kick his ass. Kane offers them some insurance ahead of their match against Too Cold Scorpio and Sandman. New Jack swears some more before just levelling Kane with a punch. He swears some more and then basically ends up booking them in a three-way against Scorpio and Sandman and the Headhunters for tonight's main event. Rory, sign me up for more sweary New Jack promos.
Absolutely, yes. New Jack, oh my goodness me. You don't argue with New Jack, do you? If he says it's Tuesday, it's Tuesday. You know what I mean? And I know we talk a lot on this show about how much we like promos from the heart. I think this was that and more some on this occasion. I mean, bloody hellfire. There's not much more I can add. In the he only said about 5 different words in that promo.
Three of them were fuck. Yeah.
Exactly, yes, but that's all you need, and if that's what's going to get you over, dance with what brung you, I guess.
Steve?
Yeah, he's brilliant on the mic, isn't he? And he just absolutely gets the crowd popping with the promo, and it's a funny promo as well. You know, it's from the heart. Obviously, he's been through all this shit, but it's a funny. I really, I thought it was great, and he really gets the crowd going straight off the bat.
Yeah, I think we talk at a time where WCW and WWF are going after free agents like mad. Nobody is signing New Jack cutting these promos on national television.
No.
If you're Paul Heyman, you can push New Jack safe in the knowledge at least that he's not going to get poached by any of the bigger two. There's a whole new load of different problems that come with pushing New Jack. That ain't one of them. Yeah, this was really fun. Maybe that's not the best word to describe a promo that was about 40% swear words. But I really like what they've done with the gangsters. You know, they were effectively playing the heels when it was against Public Enemy, the ECW favourites. Public Enemy leave, and then rather than try and fight the tide, because I think there was, one, they've got a lot of heelish tag teams in ECW. We saw at CyberSlam last month when New Jack wasn't there. They just had Mustafa come out and get beaten up in a handicap match. I'm like, okay, they're going to turn them face. And it's not difficult to see why off the back of this. The fans were laughing. They're enjoying it. The content of the promo was a bit obvious, I would guess. It's not difficult to come out and swear and just say fuck Eric Bischoff and fuck Vince McMahon. But I think he added a lot to it with the delivery. I agree with Rory, you believe everything he says. And Rory's thoughts on, the gangsters as this babyface tag team. I think it's going to work. It's not the same as the Public Enemy, but I think they're going to fill that kind of role.
I think so, yes. They are ass kickers with a capital ass kick. And that's what ECW fans love. I get the impression they've been wanting to cheer the gangsters for a fair while, and now Public Enemy have gone to pastures new. They now have free reign to do it, and I think they're going to run with this ball big time. I hope so.
We see the end of JT Smith against Axel Rotten. He botches a second rope flying DDT for some booze, hits a powerbomb, but Axel kicks out. Smith ends up low-blowing Rotten, using the ropes for leverage, and wins the match. Not really long enough to review. We move on to Bad Crew versus El Puerto Ricaño and Damien Stone. Ricaño attempts a suicide dive with Bad Crew. When Bad Crew are walking out and he misses hard, he recovers quickly and hits a double clothesline from the top. Bad Crew dump him out of the ring again and hit Stone with a double team move, then a Tiger Driver. Out comes Brian Pillman, flanked by Philadelphia Eagles footballer Harry Boat Swain. Pillman calls out Joey Styles. I think the match just disintegrated, really. Pillman tells him not to worry. I love you, man. It's quite certain that the Rogue Horseman is here. When I ask the question and you don't know the answer, you go back to the classroom. Douglas is on the microphone, but he's in the Eagle's nest. Douglas says he's going to kick his ass. Pillman and Boatswain walk off to the back. Douglas says it's WCW versus ECW, and I say Extreme wins. Douglas attempts to rip off his shirt, but doesn't quite make it, ends up wearing it around his neck like a cape. He bemoans Hulk Hogan for that. Fans chant, Pillman is a pussy. Steve, we won't review the match, wasn't really anything of note. Thoughts on this post-match angle?
This started throughout the show. I did laugh at the trying to get his shirt off and, fuck you, Hogan, and stuff like that. It's explosive, isn't it? And again, the crowd lap it up. I think Douglas is really, really strong as the sort of foil for Pillman in this. Both of them really doing some good mic work, and it's really intense. Obviously, they bring in the NFL guy. What was his name?
Harry Boatswain, I believe.
Yeah, so he's not a household name, and certainly in my neck of the woods. But he got the crowd popping, and it was a good start to what develops with this angle.
Roy.
Yep, totally agree. These two they gave the impression they really wanted to riff off each other, but ECW wisely still only gave us a taster of this, and they did so in the New York show as well. And every time these two are on the mic, they just leave me wanting more. And as Steve says, it built really nicely for what we got later on as well. It's just brilliant stuff, these two on the mic. I could listen to them go at it on the mic all day long. Pillman is in an ultra class of his own. Douglas is excellent. Just plug them in and watch them go.
Yeah, Pillman's pissed off, Douglas is pissed off. It kind of works. This is Douglas playing the role he kind of played in 1994 in ECW, just this representative of the house almost, in that he's the voice of the ECW fans rallying against WCW and the WWF. Particularly it's only a week later that Pillman's back on Nitro, and the angle that we are going to review later on actually happened before this, and I think a fair few people who probably travelled to both shows would have seen the stuff with what happened with Douglas and Pillman the night before already. Whether this angle as a whole benefited anybody, we'll discuss in a bit, but in terms of if you take each chapter in turn, they're all quite effective in one way or another. And, Douglas, for all of his faults, reminds us how good he can be when he goes to rip off his shirt. He gets all the way to the collar. The collar doesn't break. He's like, oh, fuck you, Hogan. You make it look so much easier than that. Which fit the character perfectly. And he ended up wearing it like a cape, which worked really well. We'll discuss that more later on. We move on next to the Eliminators, Cronus and Saturn versus the Dudley Clique, which is Bubba Ray Dudley and Hack Myers. I think it says a lot about they've got so many Dudleys yet they're only using one of them. Big Dick chokeslams Saturn. We cut to Hack Myers laying waste. Saturn hits a lovely Frankensteiner on Bubba. Myers takes the total elimination, and the Eliminators retain the titles. Again, another match that's probably not long enough to cover. We'll chat about a match in a minute. In fact, we'll chat about this one. It's Chris Jericho. Making his debut, sort of not, yesterday or the night before, against Taz, with Bill Alfonso. Taz starts with a forward roll takedown into a Fujiwara armbar. Jericho does his own arm submission into a bridge. Fans chant Lionheart, which is Jericho's kind of wrestling name. Jericho reverses a waistlock into a German suplex with bridge for a 2. Taz gets a pep talk from Alfonso on the outside. Taz returns to the apron. Jericho jumps diagonally off the top and kicks Taz to the floor. Then does it again, hits a crossbody to the outside. Jericho hits a top rope splash for a 2, then a lion salt and another 2. Taz hits a Northern Light suplex into a lovely bridge, but Jericho kicks out. Jericho flips out of a second rope belly to back suplex and runs over Taz with a clothesline. Taz hits a Tazplex. Jericho starts selling a bad neck injury. Referee Jim Molyneux stops the match, but Jericho says he's fine. The match restarts. Jericho hits a big kick, but Taz hits another Tazplex and locks in the Taz mission, and Jericho is out. We will discuss the post match angle in a minute, but suffice to say that given that Taz didn't let go of the hold, Jericho ends up winning the match by disqualification. Rory, what do you think of the match?
Great stuff. They only gave us about 6 minutes, but they packed tons in there. This was a brilliant way to debut, or sort of debut, Jericho. It got over his moveset, which I'm massively impressed by. And it also got over the fact of the character I think he's going to be playing in ECW, which is a plucky, up and atom, never say die babyface. And he played that role to perfection. And once again, as I said when I was on the show a few months ago, Taz is really getting over as this ruthless, virtually cruel man of destruction. I mean, just whipping Jericho at the end, locking him into ultra Taz mission and not letting go while Bill Alfonso does Bill Alfonso stuff on the outside. Fantastic. And the lack of a absolute decisive finish, with it being overturned by DQ at the end, means that we might well be getting some more Jericho Taz in the future, and fingers crossed for that, because the taster they gave us here, fantastic.
Steve?
Yeah, it just wasn't long enough, but it's enough to give us, as Rory says, a nice taster, and if we can get this again a couple of times, it wouldn't be such a bad thing from me. Jericho looked very, very strong in this sort of match, short match that we got. Some great suplexes, by both guys, and there's a Northern Lights suplex by Taz that was so just perfectly executed. It could have scored a 10 at the gymnastics in the Olympics. It was that sort of superb. And then that was just before we got that brutal looking suplex in which Jericho lands on his head, which looked pretty nasty actually. And it, very hard hitting, very, very realistic. Just could have went longer for me. But if it's just a taste, it was a great taste.
Yeah, 6 minutes. I think the idea was, let's try and, they're building Taz so hard right now. Even guys that you would think would be on his level are struggling to hang with him. See, Bam Bam Bigelow to a point. See, Mikey Whipwreck and guys like that. So it's tricky in the sense that this is a pairing that perhaps on another day you may not do, in the sense that Jericho, you bring a guy in, you're going to introduce him to your crowd, maybe having him pass out in a submission isn't the best thing to do, but the way they framed it, it wasn't a particularly long match. They kind of had him have a sort of out in that he kind of got injured. So when Taz locked it in, as I say, maybe on another night you don't do the match with a new guy, but given what they did, I think they got it just about right. Excuse me, in terms of not having a particularly long match, having a very even match, and Jericho gets caught. As we'll see later on, Jericho had a very good show with Cactus Jack the night before too. So between those two matches, Jericho comes in, it may be a loss, but when you frame it with what they framed around this match and what we're about to come to in a sec, it didn't take away from Jericho, which I think is a part of it. Anyway, Damien Stone attempts to release the hold. Out comes more help in the form of the Eliminators and Brian Pillman. Taz relents, then shapes for Pillman, who all of a sudden has lost some of his bravado. He does have time to take out El Puerto Ricaño on the R-Way, but he legs it when Douglas charges down the R-Way, who ends up being held back by Pitbull too. Pillman runs around the ring, swan dives over the guardrail, straight into the arms of Boatswain, and gets taken out of the building. Douglas ends up in the ring, and a standoff is teased between Douglas and Taz. Taz legs it, and Douglas and co. tend to Jericho. Steve, what do you think of this post-match angle?
Yeah, I like the tease between Taz and Douglas, because they didn't overdo it. There's a different story to tell here, and it's not between Taz and Shane Douglas. But I just like all the elements at play, just adding more fuel to this fire. I really, really enjoyed that. Whether anything comes of it, whether anything comes of Pillman being involved in this bit, but they're building and building and building, and it's going to get to a point where, people are going to just be clamouring for a ticket to see Douglas and Pillman, and the way they weave it through the show. It's not overkill for me. I love it. It's absolutely fantastic.
Rory?
Yeah, one of ECW's strengths are their ability to interlink stories, and they managed to do this here by bringing Douglas in. A match between Chris Jericho and Taz, remember? They managed to have Shane Douglas out there, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world after Pillman had left. And it felt, yep, I know where this is going. They're teasing Taz and Douglas. That's the logical end to this little 2 or 3 minutes. And that's where they went. And I really want to see that match as well. And I'll tell you what I would like to see. It's not going to happen now. But Taz v Pillman. But that's one for the dreams, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we might have to wait a while for that one. Yeah, no, you're both completely right in your assessment, in the sense that well, and I think I said this last month as well. One thing ECW stands out a lot more compared to, say, WWF and WCW is that the national promotions tend to compartmentalise their feuds a lot more. So X in a program with Y, or a segment with X, and Y will come out, and then we'll ship them off to the back, and then we'll reset, and we'll start a new match after commercial break, and then we'll do another program with this guy and this other guy. I don't even know necessarily that they were teasing anything with Taz and Douglas. I think it was just more, these two things interlink. There is a reason that Douglas and Taz should have a beef, in the sense that those two should both believe they're kings of this castle. And therefore, we have them both out there, let's have them stand off. I think if they were teasing something, that would imply they might get to it in a couple of months. They may not. It was more just a very natural thing to do once you'd taken the angle in that direction. Once you've got Pillman out there, it makes 100% sense to get Douglas out there. While Taz is still in the ring, once Pillman goes, it makes a lot of sense for those two to confront each other, because it's just a natural thing to do. It's not something necessarily that's going to play out in the next couple of months. It's just, that's a reminder, actually, these two are two of the biggest kings of this castle. Someday we're going to find out who's better. Maybe not yet, but we'll just leave that at the back of people's minds. Very, very effective. I like what they did with Pillman. I like the post-match angle. I think it's two really big thumbs up. Rory, let's discuss the Pillman stuff now. I think it's a good time to do it. We've got the stuff with the angle from New York that we'll review, but I think this is essentially the last thing we see of Pillman. Actually, no, it's not. We do get a bit more TV. But in terms of the effectiveness from the stuff we've seen on this show and the stuff we saw on TV before, what are your thoughts on the Pillman stuff in terms of what they've done with it?
When Brian Pillman turned up on Hardcore TV on CyberSlam last month, and the promo he cut was one of the most electrifying I've ever seen or heard in a professional wrestling context. It was spellbindingly good. Sat in a completely different universe to almost anything else I've seen in wrestling. I've been a fan for many years. Where do you go after that? And everything else they've done since has been watchable. It's been interesting. They've kept the fire burning, but I don't think they've quite moved on from it. A lot of the stuff we've seen has been standard, good standard, but still standard professional wrestling angle stuff. Whereas the promo at CyberSlam was completely otherworldly. And I didn't like him wrestling with a pencil and using the word job on television. Even in ECW, that's going too far. And I really, really didn't need to see all of Brian Pillman at the end of the show either. But there you go. At least just put out a little disclaimer beforehand. That's fine. So he's got himself over in every skit he's done by the sheer strength of his personality and the brilliance of his mic work. But when we come to look back on it, maybe they didn't quite get to the heights that they really wanted to with this, because they shot their bolt early with the CyberSlam promo, which, if there's a promo of the year, it's going to take something very special to beat that. But for me, that's as good as it got by a fair way.
Steve?
Yeah, it's electric stuff. And you get a feeling that they're building and building, and I just don't want it to build to nothing or just fizzle out. And, as Rory says, it started off, the promo at CyberSlam, and to be able to keep it up and then not get to a conclusion is a worry of mine, because he's been around now for sort of 3-4 weeks or so. Have we seen him now?
Well, in terms of Big Ass Extreme Bash will come the second weekend, so it's about 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks, yeah, it's about 3 weeks, and clearly we're building to something. I just don't want it to fizzle out because it started. But I mean, he's electric. Everything that he does, it's absolutely fine within the ECW environment as well. Like Rory says, let's just hope it doesn't become too smart. The pencil, is very broad strokes, isn't it? We all understand what's happening there. We don't want it to get too smart. We want to just keep up that electricity that is in the air and really, really go somewhere with it. And the fear is that they may not.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the theory goes at the end of the month that this might be it. What we've seen on this show, what we reviewed from New York, on the Hardcore TV, and the couple of skits we got afterwards. He did appear on Nitro. He was being billed for Uncensored and they never turned up. I don't know what happened there. But as I understand it, there's a very good chance it might be it. There's also, as I understand it, there was never really the perception he was ever going to wrestle. Which may partly explain why it didn't really go anywhere. They just kind of thought, we've got Pillman, he's doing his thing, let's just utilise him while we've got him. Douglas is a good foil, they can have some entertaining back and forth, and that's the end of that. Yeah, I'd agree though, when someone comes in and cuts that kind of promo in February, you're kind of thinking, okay, we've got some big plans, and I wouldn't say they didn't, they just more couldn't. And so, I think in terms of the parameters that they were in, I think they actually did a very good job, just in terms of creating something very interesting, quite fun to watch. Whether it's done a lot for Pillman, I don't know. Pillman rocks up on Nitro, and we'll cover this in the WCW part. I don't know that Pillman rocked up on Nitro and he was a bigger star because of 3 weeks in ECW. I don't know that enough people cared. But in terms of, I think it was another thing where it's another layer of notoriety for ECW. I think it's done a lot for Douglas, who came back, and he came back, we remember in January, that kind of mid-card debut with Bubba Ray Dudley, which disappointingly hasn't gone anywhere. I'm still waiting for those vignettes. But that, that kind of thing happened and went okay, and then they sort of moved Douglas along. Pillman, if nothing else, has helped position, and I don't think this was Pillman's goal, but Pillman, if nothing else, from an ECW point of view, has helped reposition Douglas in this, kind of gatekeeper for ECW. The guy that represents ECW, if there was ever a meeting of the WWF, WCW and ECW, Douglas will be leading the charge, probably alongside Paul Heyman. But yeah, entertaining segments. Has anyone drawn any money as a result of it? I don't know. We'll come to the New York thing later, but I think now's a good time to chat about it. But in terms of a little kind of storyline stitched throughout the early part of the show, probably a thumbs up. Next up, it's Juventud Guerrera against Rey Mysterio in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Mysterio takes Guerrera down into a surfboard. Guerrera counters into a leg lock. Mysterio rolls it into a leg lock of his own with a bridge, and then into a chin lock. Mysterio hits a Hurricane Rana from the top. He rolls through a tester straight, then hits a monkey flip. Guerrera flips out into a body scissors and then a failed pin attempt. Guerrera goes for a tilt and whirl slam, but Mysterio rolls him up, almost to the first fall. Mysterio hits a head scissors to the outside, then stops the dive when Guerrera moves. Mysterio pivots on the apron, hits a top rope moonsault to the floor. Guerrera follows Mysterio to the top. Mysterio slides out of it to a powerbomb for a 2. Guerrero hits a nice brainbuster. He then hits a springboard rolling dropkick to Mysterio. That was nice. Guerrero hits a dragon suplex, and that's the first fall. We restart. Mysterio hits a Hurricane Rana. Guerrero charges into the corner for a block, but Mysterio moves. On the apron, Guerrero gets hit by a Hurricane Rana, sending him to the outside. John Finnegan leads through the ropes to check on Guerrero. Mysterio then runs at him, using him as a launching pad for a somersault planter to the outside. Back in the ring, Mysterio hits a powerbomb, then a lion salt, both only get 2s. Guerrero goes for a top rope crossbody, Mysterio catching him with a dropkick, then a powerbomb, and we're level at 1 apiece. Guerrero dropkicks Mysterio off the top, then hits a running dropkick under the second rope. He hits a springboard moonsault off of the apron, landing on Mysterio in the first row of fans. Back in the ring, he hits a springboard spin kick for a 2. He goes for a springboard somersault leg drop, but Mysterio moves. Guerrero attempts a leg drop from the top, but Mysterio catches him into a powerbomb for a 2. Guerrero hits an impressive press into a fallaway slam for a 2. Mysterio hits a head scissors takedown on the outside. Mysterio hits him with a chair in the first row of fans, and hits a springboard somersault plancher into the first row. We go deep into the crowd, through the front door, or the back door rather, to the outside. Mysterio leads Guerrero towards a parked car. Guerrero powerbombs him onto the hood. Mysterio then gets up and hits a Hurricane Rana off the hood onto the concrete. Mysterio launches a chair at Guerrero's head. The chair is not onto him, but actually wraps itself around his head. Back in the ring by this point. Guerrero goes for a raised edge off the top. Mysterio counters into a reverse Hurricane Rana and gets the victory. After the match, Mysterio gets Guerrero onto the table and hits a package powerbomb through it. Steve, what do you think of this?
This was just unbelievable for me. 17 minutes just flew by. We started in the ring. We went through the arena. We ended up outside in the parking lot, back again. Some of the spots were just, breathtaking. The speed, the fluidity. There was no, it just went straight into it. There was no feeling out process. We just continued straight from the match that they had the night before. They actually start out by just spitting at each other, really, and then we're straight into it. There's a few bits that they get a bit tangled up near the corner, in one bit, but it's just such a great, it's all so fluid and so sort of, you can dismiss some of the bits that they blow. Just a brilliant, 17 minutes, it just flies by.
Rory.
Absolutely mind-blowingly brilliant stuff. It's just stunning action. And one of my main criticisms of the lucha style is that the spectacle can often override the intentions of the match. That's not the case here. I genuinely believe that both men in here were trying to win the contest rather than just put on a show. And in doing so, they really did put on a show. Everything they put together looked lithe, it was crisp. It was absolutely beautiful. Some really complex exchanges that they pulled off. They hit everything they went for. Some stunning reversals. I mean, I could be here until the end of the year, just running through every single wonderful spot they did. This was captivating, and it's listed as being extreme lucha, so we had a few chair shots in there as well, and the powerbomb onto a car, but they were just there to add a bit of salt and pepper to the action. They didn't override it or become the prime mover in any way. The main part of the match was these two phenomenally talented wrestlers just going out there and giving us some mind-blowing action for 17 minutes. I loved it, the crowd loved it. Just fantastic.
Yeah, this was the second of two out of three falls match they did over these pair of shows, and it's interesting to find out that the New York crowd didn't take to it anywhere near as well as the Philadelphia crowd did. I think in part because the Philadelphia crowd has seen these guys before, and also, well, in fact, they have seen Mysterio and Uven 2 before, actually, I think on one of the New York shows a couple of months ago, but they're not used to this style, and I think if you're in New York and you're not at the ECW arena every week and you're not watching TV every week, you go to ECW expecting a kind of wrestling, and it's probably not this. But this was a fantastic match in front of an audience that wanted to like it. There's an issue, but there's always going to be an issue with lucha style wrestling when it comes to a lack of selling and a lack of storytelling. But again, while the action is so impressive, you can kind of forgive it in a really weird kind of way. Like, you can kind of forgive a lack of selling when they're packing this much stuff in. A ludicrous amount of spots. I mean, it's one of those things. There were so many kind of 8, 9 out of 10 spots. None of them really stood out. The finish with the kind of reversal off of the razor's edge from the second rope into the reverse Hurricane Rana. We've actually seen it before, but that's still damn impressive. It was nice to see them go outside. We don't get that very often on ECW shows. And just a fantastic match. It's not the kind of style of wrestling I'm massively enamored with, but hell, like, even if you don't love it, you can still admire the skill of the two guys involved. And on a show that, on a show where that's not always apparent, it's a very mixed bag, ECW, when it comes to styles and types of wrestling. A lot of this show, particularly as we get deeper into it, was walking brawl, crowd side stuff, and some of the match reviews I've got are kind of shorter on the basis that it's difficult to review stuff from on the TV that just sprawls into the crowd because you don't see a lot of it. The flip side of having all of that is that this stands out even more than it would do anyway. And Steve, it's not hard to see why some people think this is the future.
No, definitely not. And you'd said right at the top of the show that, ECW can sometimes be just brawls and violence, and sometimes you get a little bit sort of, desensitized to that, and it can sometimes become a little bit the same. When you've got something like this, though, in the middle of a show, or pretty much in the middle of a show, and then those other things can work around it. To me, this whole show, the whole 2 days, as I said before, these two matches, and particularly the second one, is just the linchpin to the entire show. It was just fantastic. And if, like Rory says, you don't want it to just be a series of moves. You want them to still be able to tell a story, still be hard hitting, still go for the win. And this had everything for me. And if this is the future, if this is what we're going to get more of, and it's going to be like this, then, sign me up now, because I was just absolutely blown away by it. And I'm someone that's been raised over the last 7 years, I'd say, on WWF action. So for me to come and look at this and see what these two guys could produce on 2 nights as well, and the length that they did it, you could understand maybe, putting something like this on for a 6 or 7 minutes, but they went nearly 20 minutes and they went all throughout the arena. It didn't spoil the match by going out and leaving the ring. It just added to it, and I'm speechless, really, which is not what you want, really, but I'm absolutely speechless at how great this match was. I fell in love.
Roy?
Yep, if this is the future, then take me there right now. Both of these matches, it's nearly 35 minutes worth of action, and action is the word. They managed to fill every last second with something, and it was something which mattered. Every last beat of the match was for a reason. And it wasn't just a spectacle. It wasn't just a display. These were 2 wrestling matches. The scouting network that Paul Heyman must have to bring these guys in from a North American perspective, bringing them in from almost out of nowhere. I don't know how he does it, but we are the lucky ones, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see how this translates to a national stage. We ran a story, I think, last month about WCW being in contact with Conan about trying to get Mysterio, Guerrero, et al. Onto their shows and away from ECW. No real development on that this month, partly because we haven't heard any news and partly because they've been on this show. I would be surprised, if not a bit disappointed, if WWF aren't looking at these guys as well. But it will be interesting to see, because there's a temptation to group these guys in with Guerrero, Benoit, Malenko. There's a couple, in terms of when they move to WCW, there's a couple of things that are different about this, in the sense that, one, those 3 guys are all native English speakers for a kickoff. And also in the sense that they look like traditional wrestlers. They're all big guys, they're all muscly. I wonder what happens when Rey Mysterio, a guy who's barely over 5 foot tall, looks maybe 17 years old. He's a bit older than that, but he doesn't look it. Turns up in a mask. Juventud Guerrero turns up in his get-up. How a WWF or WCW crowd respond to that? I don't know. That'll be fun to see, because there's no guarantee. We sort of found out about it in New York, in the sense that when you've got an audience that doesn't necessarily have that ingrained in them, this style, or at least have that open-mindedness ingrained in them, or just the fact that we know these guys are going to be good because we've read about them, as a lot of the ECW fans would have done. How that translates is another story, but equally, once the bell rings, I kind of find it difficult to think people aren't just going to be impressed. Forget the size, forget the lack of natural English language speaking from these guys. Once the bell rings, it's wrestling being a universal language, and this is different to what they're seeing, but in many ways it's better. So we'll see. But while they're in ECW, I think certainly this is the place they're going to get the chance to show off their skills in such a kind of raw and complete form, and this is it, and you can only have high praise. Anyway, we will move on. It's Mikey Whipwreck against Cactus Jack. They announced this as being Cactus Jack's final match in ECW, which gets positive crowd response. Jack says someday Mikey will be able to tell his kids Cactus Jack's last match was with him, but he'll be damned if he'll be able to tell them that he beat Cactus Jack. Mikey's wearing a neck brace following his match with Taz the previous night in New York. Jack dominates the early goings with a beat down in the corner, followed by a running knee. On the outside, Cactus Jack goes for 3 chair shots, but Mikey ducks them all. Cactus remains in control. People keep handing Cactus weapons and he keeps throwing them away. Mikey rallies back into the ring and clotheslines both of them clean over the top rope before driving Cactus into the guardrail, then hitting a belly-to-back suplex onto the concrete floor. Mikey tries a reverse Hurricane Rana off the top, but Cactus blocks it and drops him onto the timekeeper table. Cactus leans the table up against the ring post, hits a belly-to-back suplex, and the table barely even moves as Mikey just bounces off of it. Cactus hits an elbow drop off the second rope to Mikey on the outside. That's the first time he's done it as a heel in ECW, I think. Cactus grabs a chair, but Mikey kicks it into his face. They brawl into the crowd. Mikey hits the top rope flip dive to Cactus Jack in the crowd. The crowd, as they have been all night, respond with ECW chants. Cactus hits a suplex onto the concrete. Back in the ring, Cactus hits a pile driver, then a double underhook DDT, which Mikey kicks out of. Cactus hits a running leg drop on the apron, then an elbow from the floor to Mikey on the apron. On the floor, Cactus hits a neck breaker over the guardrail. That looked lovely. Cactus then goes to the apron, jumps for a reverse back elbow, but Mikey moves and Cactus crashes into the guardrail. Mikey hits Cactus with a chair once, twice, 3 times over the head, then a 4th, which finally sends Cactus down. Mikey pins him, but Cactus kicks out too. A fan hands Cactus Jack a vinyl LP album. Jack just runs off with it back into the crowd. Around towards the Eagle's Nest, Mikey hits a suplex, then climbs to the camera position. Then it's a big slash off the Eagle's neck to the floor. I said it was about a 10-foot drop. Back in the ring, Mikey comes off the top, but Cactus catches him with a forearm. Jack strikes Mikey with a chair across the back 3 times, then hits the pile driver onto the chair, and that will end that. We will come to the post-match angle in a minute. Rory, what do you think of the match?
What a great match, quite simply. Before we get to anything else, Cactus Jack, we love him in these parts, and quite rightly so. But one of the things I think we underrate is his wrestling ability. He's got the fundamentals down. I know that was what made him a heel in ECW 3 or 4 months ago, but I think the crowd reaction he got today indicates to me that the crowd really do appreciate that he can go in the ring. And I think that's going to stand him in good stead where he's heading next. And Mikey's getting better and better and better as well. So they put together a really well-built and well-structured match with some very nice sequences. Obviously it had the ECW moments in there as well. But when these two got together, I get the impression these two really do like working together as well. And if you have somebody in the ring who you can trust, who you can balance things out with, it makes for a much better viewing contest. It even had a bit of comedy as well when Cactus was being handed some really rubbishy weapons. I think somebody handed him a sieve at some point, and he just threw it away. Although the Leonard Cohen album did get in the ring. Sadly, we didn't get Cactus singing his own version of Suzanne at the end. But this was great, an emphatic finish. I suppose you could argue that in his last match, should Cactus really have won? But I wasn't really worrying about that at the time. This was terrific, and yeah, I'm going to say it, a very fitting way to go out for somebody who I just cannot say enough good things about. 2 big thumbs up yet again.
Steve?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. It was a perfect match to sail off into the sunset to. We go out to the floor and we get the guardrail shots and we get some brutal sort of chair shots as well and some bumps. But it's the stuff that happens in the ring, as Rory rightly says, that, it resonates because it's his last match. You know that these 2 guys have been through it, and it's such a good story as well. We get the balcony dive and stuff like that, but it's a great match. Despite all the stuff that happens outside the ring, it just, again, it's a great match, a great show, and a perfect sort of farewell finale for Cactus.
Yeah, he's had a lot of very different styles, types of matches in ECW. This was, As I noted, I thought it was significant he did the elbow drop off of the apron. I haven't seen that in a while. In fact, I think when he immediately after he turned heel a few months back, he teased it and then didn't do it, and we haven't kind of seen it since. So I thought that was kind of a nod to this is my final match. A really, really good brawl. Again, the kind of thing that I like this. I don't like the fact that we had about 4 matches that followed that kind of replicated this style, in that you get to the end of the show and, you know, so every month, not all this ends up on TV, some of it's just for the live crowd, some of it will only end up on home video, etc., etc. But this is the kind of thing that if you can position and, you know, produce some of your other matches a bit more conservatively, will stand out more. And okay, it came up first, but I don't know whether if this had have been followed by a couple more matches. I mean, I thought this placement was quite interesting, given that it was quite relatively early on the card, given that this actually could have been the main event, and perhaps should have been. I kind of thought that this would have been the perfect way to finish the show, as it was a fantastic match.
I said some pretty outrageous things, and to have 99% of you give me this kind of reception, it makes it all seem worth it. And you know, there were times when I really hated getting out in this ring in front of you people. Thank you. For these 4-hour shows that ECW puts on, I gotta tell you, I sat back in front of the monitor and had the time of my life for about 3 hours and 45 minutes of it, until it came time to get out here. But I'll tell you what I see when I'm back there enjoying those shows that I've never seen in any other wrestling organization I've been in, is a group of people who give a damn. A group of people who root for their fellow wrestlers, don't sit back there and wait for them to screw up. So listen, if this organization can last without Terry Funk, it sure as hell can do without Cactus Jack. It's true. There's a hell of a lot of talent out there that's just dying to be seen here, and this arena is the highlight for them. I can tell you for a fact that the people in New York City are a bunch of scumbags. Tonight for a shoulder injury, for guys who just wanted to come in and show what they could do like the Eliminators, to somebody like Sabu who's risked his life week in and week out here. I feel pretty sure that you can do without Cactus Jack, but I'd like to think, hey, me and the sign guy can make you friends. And he started this whole thing. Let's hear it for John. He's afraid to let go of me because he thinks you'll see him crying. But you know what? my show, man. There's two guys back there who need some special mention. Two guys sitting in the chairs right now who really are the lifeblood of ECW. Let's face it, without them, there would be no Extreme Championship Wrestling. One of them, he's a creative genius. The other guy's a visionary who saw what he wanted to accomplish and went about conforming ECW. So right now I'm going to bring him out here.
Now this is classy.
I've only seen eye to eye.
Really classy.
I'd like you to bring out the two people that make this whole thing work. The Heartbreak Kid, Stevie Richards.
Fans sound their appreciation at the end of the match with a standing ovation. We get large Cactus Jack chants. Cactus goes after Mikey, offers out a hand and pulls him to his feet for offering him a hug. Jack said leaving this arena was almost as hard as having to sue his Uncle Eric. That's another thing we'll hear about in the WCW part of the show this month. I said some pretty outrageous thing, and to have 99% of you giving this kind of reception makes it all seem worth it. Cactus makes it up with Sign Guy, has a sign that says, keep Uncle Vince away from Dewey. Cactus starts making good with some of the fans in the front row. He then says that he wants to praise the pair of visionaries and creative geniuses without whom ECW wouldn't exist. He is, of course, on about Stevie Richards and the Blue Meanie. They come out and Cactus Jack says if he had one last wish, it would be to do the Fargo strut out of the ECW, which he, Richards and Meanie do. Rory, this promo has got a lot of praise from people who were at the show, and quite rightly so.
Absolutely wonderful. So we're only in March. We've already had two major contenders for promo of the year. We had Pillman last month, and we've got this from Cactus this month. This isn't a word we use often to describe anything in ECW, but I'm going to. It was just nice. It was nice. It was Cactus Jack, Mick Foley, whatever you want to call him, just saying thank you. And people in the audience, a very select group in the audience, as we know, appreciating that. It was just absolutely lovely to see. And he wanted to strut out of the arena because he wanted to strut out of the arena. And he strutted out of the arena. Just perfect. For all of the brickbats and the criticism that professional wrestling gets, at its best, nothing produces moments as truly nice and real as this can. And it was a privilege to watch it.
Steve?
Yeah, it's just so genuine, wasn't it? And, you know, he's trying not to burst into tears during it, and it must, you know, it's so emotional for him, and to have actually been there would be something else. You know, we only get how it comes across on TV to us, but yeah, you know, just heartfelt, isn't it? You know, and because the crowd appreciate him, he appreciates the crowd as well, no matter what side of the fence he's on, face or heel. You know, he gets it, the crowd get it, and it's just a perfect sign off, and hopefully he goes on to some really good things, because he deserves it. And, you know, we don't know what the future's going to bring, but hopefully, you know, he's one of the good guys, I'd say, in wrestling.
No, when Guerrero Malenko left ECW, there was the kind of thought that, I don't want to say that they owed ECW anything, but more that they arrived as something and they grew into something else. I don't know whether ECW fans could say that Cactus Jack was necessarily, you know, he showed off a lot of his skills, but I don't know that you could say about Cactus Jack what you might have said about Guerrero Malenko and Benoit, in the sense that ECW helped finish their characters off. So this was kind of a more different send-off. You know, Jack was around WCW for a while before he left there and came here. And so this was more of a stepping stone between two big things, rather than with the others where it was more of a kind of launch pad. And I think this was more of a, you know, we could add the Public Enemy into that kind of comparison as well. This was more of a, you know, thank you for coming, rather than a, you know, we help make you type send-off. And yeah, I think Rory sent it out quite nicely. Nice probably does really sum it up in the sense that it wasn't too long. He didn't break character, because that's the thing, when you're playing this kind of character and you're trying to do a send-off promo, it's not that easy, and he didn't break character in a way that was jarring. He just kind of, made peace, I think is the best way of doing it. And then you're just wondering where it's going to go with the Creative Geniuses thing. And just when he pulls you in, just when you think, oh, this is going to be this really sentimental moment, out come Stevie Richards and Blue Meanie. It's like, yeah, that's the way to end it. And he went out, how he wanted to go out, doing the strut. And that ended that, and it was the perfect send-off in many ways. I think the other thing to mention about whether he should have beaten Mikey Whipwreck or not, I was thinking about that during the match was going on, and I kind of thought, I suspect that's the kind of match they both went to each other and went, I want you to win. And I just wonder whether they got to the end of it and they just went, look, the more logical thing to do here, particularly as Mikey Whipwreck, if this had been 6 months ago, I think Mikey Whipwreck would have won the match. But given that he's not quite in such a prominent role anymore, it made more sense just to send Cactus out with a win. But equally, it was a very even, very long match, and I think the right guy won. Anyway, we move on next to the Pitbulls with Francine against the Bruise Brothers, Ron and Don Harris. This actually starts out as a normal tag match. One of the Harris brothers leathers Pitbull 2 with a clothesline in the corner. Pitbull 2 fights out and hits a body slam. We cut to Pitbull 1 being sent to the outside. Pitbull 2 does a double clothesline and sends both Harris brothers over. The match now is a standard ECW tag brawl, and we quickly get deep into the crowd. We cut to later in the match. They set up a Bruise brother for a super bomb and hit it. Out come the Fabulous Ones, Stevie and the Blue Meanie. Francine goes after Meanie. Stevie levels her, lines her up and hits a super kick. Out comes Tommy Dreamer, runs out with the protection he's got holding his arm together, kind of the cast type thing, and uses it as a weapon. And it ends in a no contest. Steve, quick thoughts on this? I think we just about saw enough to get some discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty sort of typical ECW affair with the brawl and the crowd. It's not really until Tommy Dreamer hits the ring that the crowd sort of go nuts for it, and it sort of finishes off with an okay angle. It's a shame really that it's Steve Richards and the Meanie that come out, because we've just seen them in the last sort of segment, and it was quite a nice sort of sailing off. I know they're not leaving, but the fact that they come back sort of spoils it a little bit for me. But it's not until Dreamer hits the ring that it gets the crowd going on this one. Other than that, it's a fairly sort of standard brawl type thing, really.
Rory?
Yeah, not much to say about this. What we got in the final broadcast on the tape was, I believe, quite heavily clipped. I'm not going to lose any sleep over that particular fact. What we saw was watchable from an ECW garbage brawl enough perspective, but that's pretty much all there is to say about it. Tommy comes in, gets the Tommy pop. Very little to say. But I do agree. It was odd seeing Stevie and Blue Meanie there back in their heel role, rather helping out when they helped out Cactus Jack in a genuinely emotional moment in the section beforehand. That was quite jarring. It didn't quite work, but at least it's given me else something to talk about from this particular match, which there was very little going on that we haven't seen a zillion times before.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing where sometimes ECW will overbook for the sake of overbooking, and I think this is one of those things. There are, the amount of ECW matches that end in run-ins or contain run-ins are just far too high. And it's difficult watching all these shows front to back, in that you can do run-ins for a live crowd perspective and then just not show them on TV, so fair enough. But equally, it's an insane amount. And one more quick one. We get Sabu against Big Titan. We cut into this match. Titan goes for a slingshot knee drop over the top. Sabu rolls off the table, and Titan goes through it knee first, which didn't look fun at all. Sabu hits a Frankenstein off the top for a 2. He then counters a throw with a DDT onto a chair, then an Arabian facebuster, and that will do that. Again, we won't discuss this one, but Sabu is a guy that has, over the last few months, filled the mid-card wrestling role, particularly on occasions where they haven't had Guerrero and Mysterio. I'd kind of like to see him do that more. Those were some of the highlights of those shows. And again, maybe it was cut for other reasons, but I just wonder whether this match wasn't all that good. Anyway, we will see. I move on next. It's Shane Douglas against Raven with Kimona Walalea, Steve Richards and the Blue Mini for the ECW heavyweight title. Raven is on crutches. Richards takes the mic. He says Raven has gout. I think he actually had a broken toe, but I think gout's funnier. Richards insists that Raven doesn't wrestle. Raven actually agrees with him. Douglas grabs the mic. He says he scratched, clawed and manipulated his way to a title shot. He then nails Raven with the mic, then takes him out at the legs. Stevie hits a Stevie kick. Raven then DDTs Douglas, who just about kicks out, and the match begins. Raven attempts to win the match by count out. It's pretty obvious that Raven is actually working hurt given the amount of shortcuts they end up taking. Douglas cuts off the third attempted count out win. They both attempt apron suplexes. Douglas dumps him on the turnbuckle, then knees him to the floor. Douglas attempts a Rey Mysterio style diagonal turnbuckle dive to the outside. It's a good effort, at least. Douglas DDTs Raven onto the chair. Kimona comes in and breaks up the pin, which doesn't impress Douglas, who spanks her. Douglas appears to let his guard down, takes a kiss, but then shoves her to the ground. Raven low blows Douglas. Raven charges at Douglas with a chair. Douglas pulls the ref into the path of the chair, who goes down. Douglas goes after Raven with his crutch. The Fabulous Ones go after Douglas. Meanie attempts a rather impressive moonsault, but still misses. Douglas gives all three of them belly-to-belly suplexes. Goes for a cover, but there's no ref to make the count. Out come the Bruise Brothers. They give Douglas a double big boot, who barely kicks out. Raven takes a chair to the face, then a butt attack from Douglas into the chair, into his face. Douglas then done a belly-to-belly. Douglas does an atomic drop on the chair, then a clothesline off of it. He attempts to bulldog Raven onto the chair in the corner. Raven counters, DDTs Douglas onto the chair, and wins the match. After the match, the Bruise Brothers come out and attack Douglas until Dreamer comes out with a chair. The Bruise Brothers turn their attention to Dreamer. Sandman comes out with a cane and lays waste to everyone. Rhea puts a chair over Raven's bad leg. He and Sandman have a conference over who should be able to do the attack on Raven's injured leg. Douglas takes advantage of them stalling and does a dive off the top onto the chair. We now have Douglas, Dreamer and Sandman in the ring. Douglas tries to reason with them. Dreamer disappears, but Sandman lines up Douglas. Out comes Scorpio, who argues with Sandman, and the segment ends. We will come to the post-match angle in a bit. Steve, what do you think of the match?
The match itself was okay. I quite enjoyed the fact that he did have a sore foot, really, and whether it was gout or what, just because it was then an excuse for the run-ins and stuff that we got. He couldn't really do it on his own, so we had to get people to come in and, be in the heel. That's sort of what we expect. So I didn't mind that so much. On obviously what we got at the end. But the match itself was, not very memorable, but they did what they could, and I'm guessing he's genuinely hurt, so they did what they had to do.
Rory?
It would have been, if this had been some other organisation, I can't think what one. I think our old friend Card Subject to Change might have been dropped in here. But all credit to Raven, he went out there and he was clearly legitimately injured. You could see as soon as the match started, he was favouring his other foot. And he went out there and had a pretty good match. On this occasion, the overbooking was for a legitimate reason. But it all still played into the individual story of the match as well, so that was fine. Some good interaction between the two. A solid ending, I thought, because I don't think anybody really thought that Douglas was going to be winning the belt. He put up a good showing, lost emphatically, but not so much as to completely bury him. And I think they did the best they could in the circumstances. These two are certainly capable of a better match, but given where we were and the fact that this wasn't actually the main event either, I'll let it go and say a good job, the best they could do.
If they hadn't have told us Raven was injured, would anyone have noticed the difference between Raven trying to cover for injuries and just a standard ECW match? Because
I don't think
it didn't feel any different, did it? Like, if Raven wasn't so visibly injured, if the match should have taken place in exactly the same fashion.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know that
agree.
people would have been going, Raven's covering for an injury. I think it would have just been standard ECW match, just a hell of a lot of interference. On a show like this, on a run-in of matches like this, I don't think I would have done the match like this. They've done it before where we've had kind of Dreamer run through Raven's lackeys and his cronies for a shot at Raven. And I kind of feel like a much better match would have been Douglas beating the piss out of Mealy, having a nice 10-minute match with Richards and then getting a few minutes with Raven at the end. I think that would have made more sense. I know it doesn't necessarily fit into the traditional idea of Douglas getting a title shot, but yeah, some matches you don't need to do, and I don't know whether they needed to do this one. Steve, the post-match angle, they did a bit more of this on TV. They had a bit more of a kind of video package looking at the three of Dreamer, Sandman and Douglas's backstory and how we kind of got here. But how did this play out for you in terms of this kind of three-way angle?
Yeah, I mean, I like Sandman as a character, and he comes in and he just canes everyone, and we've got Dreamer, and they threaten to sort of drop Dreamer onto the rope, and Dreamer's already injured. And again, if it would have, as you've said, if this would have been maybe placed somewhere else on the card or on a different card, and what came before hadn't have happened, then it would have been perfectly fine. But I'm getting to the point now in the show where I'm just a little bit sort of, I've seen some really, really quality matches, and I've seen some really, really good brawls, and this doesn't really go into either, really, for me. I mean, it sets everything up in terms of Sandman, Scorpio, Douglas, but it didn't really do much for me, the whole angle at the end.
Rory?
Oh, I liked it, I must say, and I think the post-match angle is the reason why the match happened. I don't think the suggestion, we could be wrong, but the suggestion that Douglas is going to be out and out turning heel, probably on the Sandman sometime soon, I think we needed to have his defeat for the title against Raven to help advance that particular story, to give him a reason for doing so. And just the little things they did in it, with him laughing behind Sandman's back, and then when he turns his head, just goes straight-faced again. Again, there's still a long, long way to go, and they could mess it up. But I thought this was very promising, and I like this.
Yeah, the Taz Douglas tease early in the show was a tease just because. This was a tease for a story they're going to play out probably over the next month, 6 to 8 weeks maybe. But again, it's the kind of thing where you're watching what you think is an ordinary post-match angle, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, this is a different dynamic. They cleared the ring of the heels and of Raven, and we end up with the three quote-unquote faces of the three non-Raven guys, if you like. And I think it played out in the arena quite well. I like what they did on Hardcore TV following as well, kind of giving a bit more backstory before we got the angle. And it's an interesting dynamic. They are, right or wrong, they're not positioning Taz at the moment as a guy going after the title. I suspect that will change at some point in the next 6 months, but I don't think it's their MO at the moment. I think their idea with Taz at the moment is just trying to get him over come what may. So they've kind of positioned these three guys against Sandman, and I haven't got the results through from this show yet, but I believe the show at the very end of the month was Dreamer, Sandman and Douglas against Raven and the Harris brothers, i.e. the idea of, one for the sake of a live event, main event, just as a 6-man, but also this idea that maybe these three have got to coexist to be able to get title shots against Raven. It's an interesting dynamic, and it's the kind of thing, okay, I've got three characters I like, I'm rooting for all of them, but it's an interesting dynamic to see how they play off against each other. The match itself wasn't all that, but I think the post-match angle, Rory, I think you're right in the sense that it fueled the post-match angle, and that was a nice development, and I think probably one of the big takeaways from the month. Anyway, move on to the main event. We get another Sandman entrance. This one takes an eternity. Well, they all do, really. Traditional ECW three-way rules, in the sense that two teams, teams in this case, or if it's a singles match, singles will start. And then at an point during the match, the third team will come out. So we start off with Sandman and Scorpio against the Headhunters. We start with both Sandman and Scorpio going at it with canes to both Headhunters. Scorpio hits the top rope splash and pulls up at 1. Sandman goes up to the top and drops a shockingly not awful leg drop. It's still not great, but he got some elevation for once. Damien Kane comes into the ring and eats some Kane shots, but fights back. Lady Alexandra and Missy Hyatt start brawling and they get separated. One of the Headhunters shoots for a moonsault, hits it. Sandman eats a top rope splash, but the Headhunters pull out of the pin. Out come the Gangsters. Mustafa puts a Headhunter through the timekeeper's table. Sandman flies over the top rope, cane in hand. New Jack seems to catch him in a chin lock. I don't know whether that's just them going down, but the camera angle made it like he caught him. We now have all 6 men on the floor. A Headhunter gets thrown into the crowd. Scorpio flies from the top and takes out Mustafa and a Headhunter into the crowd. Sandman eats a chair shot to the head, then a violent one from one of the Headhunters. The brawling continues. A Headhunter attempts a diving leg drop into the ring. Scorpio moves. Scorpio hits a 450 splash, for once doesn't pull up from the pin, and we have our first pinfall. As is the way, the Headhunter hits the second rope splash on Scorpio on his way out. The other Headhunter is attacking Sandman in the R-way with a cane. The Gangsters attack Scorpio 2-on-1 with Sandman seemingly in the back. We get an innovative suplex drop kick double team by New Jack and Mustafa. They drop Scorpio over the top rope, a power slam and a top rope splash, and that will do that. Rory.
This match got better as it went along. Maybe because the Sandman wasn't involved in the finish. Right, okay. Get my usual Sandman criticism out of the way. It played to everybody's strengths, i.e. the people who can't really wrestle very well got to whack people with weapons, and the 3 who are pretty decent in-ring performers got to try to carry the action. And it was fine. I was a little bit surprised in the end that New Jack and Mustafa went over. But then I went back and thought about it and thought, well, they cut that big promo at the beginning. Maybe it was telegraphed in a good way that they went on to win. I was expecting a Sandman Scorpio victory, a decent swerve at the end. And again, it was watchable because the action was just so fast and furious. And again, there were absolutely no dead spots. There was always something to watch. You just had people in there who were just going to give you violence to watch, and actual moves, unless Scorpio was in the ring, were going to be at a premium. But in as much as the Gangsters winning anything can be seen as a feel-good moment, that is what we got. And again, the crowd seemed to enjoy it. It was a popular victory, and as weird as it sounds, they sent the crowd home happy. So, all told, greater than the sum of its parts, a serviceable main event.
Steve?
Odd, really, that it was the main event. It felt more like a house show main event. But once
which
the Gangsters,
in many ways it was, don't you?
Yeah. Obviously we're seeing it. It's not a pay-per-view event, and we're seeing everything that they want to put on the tape, and this was the last thing that happened in the arena. So yeah, I get that. That it was a house show main event in all but sort of words. But when the Gangsters come out, that's when it got interesting for me, and the crowd. They love the Gangsters, and yeah, it made sense in the scheme of things that they went over at the end. What came before that was sort of just, the typical ECW thing. But yeah, it was okay, for what it was, and it ended on a high.
Yeah, I think this is one for the fans in the arena, more it is for us watching at home, and as I say, This is This is the show. This is the kind of thing that won't make it to TV. So it's more for the live crowd. I thought the match was quite logical though, in terms of, I think Rory, you said you were surprised at the finish. I thought that was the inevitable finish, in the sense that I think this is, I don't want to overdo it and call it a coronation of the gangsters, but I think it's more a indication this is the team going forward. This is the team wanting to get behind. So from that point of view, going against the Headhunters, I'm guessing a bit more of a part-time act, and Sandman and Scorpio are kind of part-time in the sense that they will have singles matches and they won't. From that point of view, it works. And yeah, like not the worst match, but equally, not too long. And I think the right team won. And I think one for people in attendance, more than anything else. And that's how the show went off the air. Rory, your overall thoughts on the show and a score rating out of 10?
We didn't get to see everything, so we need to take that into account. But what we were shown was great. There was very little rubbish. There was always something to watch, even when the action wasn't superb. But when the action was superb, was it ever that? We had some fantastic mic work. We had at least two stunning matches. We had one of the most emotional, real, greatest moments I think I've ever seen for somebody moving on from a promotion. And it all came together beautifully in a really well put together video package. So what's the absolute total sum of its parts? Probably wouldn't come to this number. Taking all of that into account, I have no problem giving this a 9.
Steve?
Yeah, I think it was certainly the best ECW show that I've seen. Everything about it worked for me in the scheme of things. There were one or two things that weren't absolutely fantastic, but as an overall package, it was just brilliant. And this is what I would, for anyone who just as a diet of WWF or just as a diet of WCW, this whole package, this tape would be what I would give them to say, look, watch this. There is an alternative. There is, things and guys doing something different. This is it. It just sort of bowled me over that much. Overall, I'm going to give it a 9 because there were a couple of things that did sort of let it down a little touch. No show is absolutely perfect. This came close to perfect, hence the 9. But it was, I loved it. Certainly the best show I've seen from ECW.
Interesting. I give this show a 6. There was some undoubtedly very, very good stuff. But it really fizzled out. And I think when you look at it, this is an excellent Juventud Guerrero Mysterio match, a very nice Jack Whipwreck match with a very, very good post-match promo. Other than that, there's some effective stuff, but I've seen really, really good ECW shows. This weren't it. I think November to Remember from last year is the yardstick. I don't think this was as good. Also, I think, there is something to be said for, and part of the reason we do these hardcore TV shows with more of a mix of guests this year than we do last is, one, to try and make it a bit more accessible in that when we get into a bit, insider references on ECW shows, it doesn't always work. But it's also to get fresh people in, because I know not everyone listening to this show watches ECW. So if you get people that are watching month after month after month, it becomes difficult to listen to unless you're watching the same volume. But an interesting comparison for me, who's seen a lot of ECW stuff, and for you guys who hasn't, maybe I'm just a bit more worn down by some of the stuff that on first or second viewing seems really entertaining. Still a very good show, but I think more in patches, and it did fizzle out. I think that's hard to disagree with. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Brian Pillman, I've had all of you I'm gonna take.
Just ignore him. Don't sink to his level, Shane. He's a fan. He bought a ticket. Leave him alone. Don't mind him. Leave him alone. He's frustrated. He couldn't cut it in WCW. Don't sink to
You're so right. Brian Pillman, I'm not going to waste an ounce of sweat on your little ass tonight.
Well, Shane Douglas once again proving himself the better man.
Brian Pillman, I'm not going to waste any time with you tonight, my friend. You've got a long time before you climb to my level. I'm not wasting any time on you. The hell I'm not. Pillman, I'm going to give you one of two choices. You can come over that rail and fight me like a man, or I'll come over there and drag your ass in here and show you what extreme is all about.
Now, Shane, wait a minute. Let's not...
Mr. Styles, it's obvious. I can't beat Brian Pillman in ECW. I mean, look what happened last time. I tried to...
Yeah, keep the fly zip. Oh, wait.
With my agent.
Agent?
I'm here with my cousin Debbie. And here, John, look at this.
Hi there.
A ticket. I'm going to give you to the count of 3, Brian, and I'll make the choice for you.
Now, Shane, wait a minute.
Shane, 1.
Shane?
2.
Don't do it.
3.
Oh, you scum, you piece of... How dare you pull a kid in front of you? Where did you get that? That's disgusting.
Get the baby out of the...
Well, what do you want me to do?
Let a man or you put...
Pillman, would you knock it off?
Put the baby down.
I'll give you your money for the ticket. Go home.
Now, Shane, why don't you just quit like you quit everything else? You quit WCW. You quit the Dynamic Dudes. You quit WWF. I'm a real man. I don't quit. I get thrown out of town. Come on.
Don't do it.
Hey, why don't you show your loyalty and come through? A woman and her child for Tommy Dreamer.
Don't let him provoke you. Be a better man. Be a...
Baby down, Pillman. Put the...
And we move on just to wrap up the TV for a month. A few talking points. We've got one match review to do and a couple of other things, but nothing massive. We open up Hardcore TV on March the 12th with Joey Styles, that introduces Shane Douglas. Sat in the crowd watching on is Brian Pillman, who makes a 4 horseman hand sign, then drops the 4 down to a 3. This is from the New York taping the night before the show we just reviewed. Douglas gets a big reaction and Pillman starts going apeshit in the front row. Styles says Pillman is a ticket buying fan tonight. Douglas says he can come over the rail and fight him like a man, or he'll climb over the rail, drag him into the ring and show him what Extreme is all about. Pillman protests. He has a ticket after all. Douglas counts to 3, then goes to take a swing, but Pillman has put a mother and child in harm's way to protect himself. I think they implied that was his cousin and his nephew. Pillman says Douglas quit WCW, he quit WWF, but Pillman is a real man. He didn't quit. He got run out of there. Pillman ends up taking a shot. Douglas then goes after him and the pair get separated. Pillman escapes and Douglas ends up being held back by multiple security. There's a sign in the front row that says, "Eric, can we also borrow Loch Ness?" Douglas gets angry and says, "The franchise calls the shots. I want that piece of shit now." Douglas also has some words for Ted Turner. Steve, quickly on this segment, we discussed the Pillman Douglas stuff earlier. This happened before what happened at the Big Ass Extreme Bash show we saw. Effective segment?
Yeah. I mean, I ate it up until the bit where Pillman got the kid in the way, and I just didn't like that. I thought the kid was too young for that sort of thing. I mean, this is just me speaking as a dad. I thought the kid looked about 2-year-old, so I didn't like that bit. Personally, I didn't like that bit, but everything else I loved. I ate it up, the crowd ate it up, and it really worked.
Rory?
Yes, I agree. I didn't like that particular part either. It goes back to what I said earlier. It's the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a standard wrestling angle, but in an ECW standard wrestling angle, let's say, and it didn't feel like Brian Pillman to me. I could see a lot of standard heels do that kind of thing. Pillman's different, but what we got there was pretty rote, pretty ECW rote anyway, and I didn't enjoy that. Otherwise, it was good. It was hot. It was extreme. I was with Douglas every word he said, but I just couldn't really. As good as that was, I was just constantly drawn towards that sign about them wanting to bring Loch Ness in. You never know.
Well, he is over there after all, might as well. A nice show opening segment, but not one that I was blown away by from a storytelling point of view. In terms of, there are certain things, and we're not going to cover it, but there are certain things when they do these kind of dueling shows that feel like we've seen it before. I think we saw kind of a Two Cold Scorpios Sandman woman angle that seemed to happen in the ECW arena, and then we saw it again in New York. This kind of felt like, it wasn't quite the same as what happened in Philadelphia, but it felt like we've got a different audience, let's tell the same story. Reviewing this after having seen the stuff earlier, it kind of felt a bit like repetition, even though it happened before. Out next is Bill Alfonso. Alfonso runs his mouth on Gordon, before hitting him. Gordon attacks Alfonso. Taz comes out to give Alfonso the advantage. Taz hands Alfonso the chair, who hits Gordon with it. Out to save Gordon's ass is Bam Bam Bigelow. Taz hits Bam Bam with a soft tear shot. He no-sells it, and Taz and Alfonso run. We get a match between the Dudleys and the Headhunters. Bubba Ray gets distracted by Lady Alexandra and gets chair shot for his troubles. But he blocks it and blocks the second one and retaliates. DW takes a superplex and a leg drop, but Bubba Ray grabs an upset with a roll-up. We get a mad promo from Bill Alfonso and a more composed one from Taz, who isn't scared by a man who cannot beat Lawrence Taylor. We then get a brawl involving the Headhunters and the Gangsters. Don't forget this happened. The Headhunters, the Gangsters, and just a reminder that this happened before Big Ass Extreme Bash. We move on next to a match review. It's Cactus Jack versus Chris Jericho. So Cactus Jack's penultimate match in ECW, alongside Jericho's first. That makes sense, given that we're reviewing it second. Jack gets introduced as being from Stamford, Connecticut, the most hardcore place known to mankind. They introduce Jericho as the last graduate of the Heart Dungeon. Meanwhile, Steve Richards offers mankind the chance to join the Fabulous Ones and do the Fargo Strut. Jack loves that and hugs them before Jericho breaks up the love-in. Jericho moves for a leg drop and shapes for a drop kick, then a monkey flip and a drop kick, sending an irate Jack to the outside. Jack unloads on Jericho in the corner, goes for a charge. Jericho moves and does another drop kick to the outside, bouncing off the second turnbuckle for an apron drop kick. After crotching Jack on the guardrail, Jericho deals with the Fabulous Ones. Jack blocks an apron suplex, lifts Jericho onto the apron with him before charging at him. Jericho moved and Jack ate some turnbuckle. Jack drapes Jericho in the trio row before dropping himself onto Jericho's head. On the outside, Jack suplexes Jericho over the guardrail. Jericho hits a lovely reverse victory roll from the top. The pair exchange rights, then a lovely big splash from the top for a 2. Cactus kicks out, clotheslines Jericho to the outside and does a jumping leg attack, squashing Jericho onto the guardrail before just dumping him onto it. Jack piledrives Jericho in the ring, but Jericho kicks out right before 3. Jericho then ducks a right, hits a bridging German suplex, and wins the match. Rory.
What a great little match this was again. Right from the very start with that fantastic reference to Stamford, Connecticut, the most hardcore place in mankind. Just fantastic. When ECW, they really do get the little things right when they want to. I thought that was magnificent. And the match lived up to it too. The thing I really liked about this particular match is that it was more of a Cactus Jack match than a Chris Jericho match. You could tell that Jack, as the heel, was driving the car, so to speak. But so we were working more of a standard Cactus Jack style than we got in the Mikey Whipwreck match, I would say. But Jericho hung with him, and again, that's going to stand him in good stead for his future in ECW. He showed he can work that particular style. And again, some terrific moments. I'm actually replaying the ending in my head And I'm thinking, what a great way for Jericho to get a victory. A bridging German suplex in which he just about manages to hold Cactus Jack down. It felt like a very sporting end, as if professional wrestling was a legitimate sport. That is the kind of way you would beat somebody like Cactus Jack. And that was a logical and believable end to what was, remember, as far as we're concerned, this was a free television match as well. And everything Cactus Jack, Mick Foley, is touching at the moment is turning to gold. I hope he takes that with him to Stamford. And I cannot wait to see what Chris Jericho's got in store for us, because so far he is looking like he is going to light the place up.
Steve?
This was superb. Yeah, I love Jack's face when Jericho drop kicks the meanie and Richards out. His face is just like, what have we done that for? I thought that was really good, but it was a brutal match. As Rory says, Jack sort of led the way on it. He really sort of goes to town on Chris Jericho. Who takes a lot of punishments and I mean really takes it, really good selling by Jericho's part. He takes boots to the throat and, he really gets torn up in there. We get a trademark baseball slide by Jack to Jericho. We get the elbow to the guardrail, and he just keeps on coming back for more. And the end was, just a perfect German suplex, from Jericho, and a great match that really probably too good for TV, really. It's the type of stuff that they might have saved for a bigger event. But great stuff. Yeah,
Jericho's come in and shown across, 24 hours that he can hang with two very different types of worker, have two very different types of good but short match. And if he is around for longer, I think it'll be interesting to see. It'd be lovely to see him against a Sabu or Too Cold Scorpio, that kind of opponent, or even someone like Shane Douglas, just to, I don't want to say get Douglas over, but almost remind Douglas that, remind people that Douglas can go. Yeah. But Jericho comes in and already seems like an uppercut utility man, which after 2 months is testament to his ability and how they presented him. But yeah, a really good match, a nice surprising victory. I guess maybe that was the thought, well, Jack can put over Jericho but then finishes on a high. That makes sense. Not that I think Jack is particularly an ego-driven guy, but more that it probably makes sense to give him one win out of the two, and this way he does get to put someone over as well. Yeah, big thumbs up from me for this one. We also get highlights of Taz hitting a lovely bridging Northern Light suplex during a match with Mikey Whipwreck. Mikey responded with a lovely slingshot crossbody to the outside. Taz hit a belly-to-belly suplex clean over the top rope that looked very dangerous. Taz wins it with the Taz mission. Bam Bam sees Taz to the outside, then shapes for Alfonso. Taz clips Bam Bam by the knee, locks in the Taz mission, and Bam Bam passes out. Rory, very quickly, interesting use of Bam Bam Bigelow that they've brought him in clearly not with the mantra of let's make him a big top star, but more with the mantra of let's use him to help get Taz over.
It looks that way, doesn't it? And now they've already referenced him losing to Lawrence Taylor. Even before Bam Bam had got in the ring, we've had that mentioned in an interview. So that is Bam Bam's going to have to carry that around like a pall now, I'm afraid. If he's just being brought in just on the short term, just to help get Taz more and more over, then okay, fair enough. I'm a fan of Taz, and as I said earlier, I really like this cold-hearted character that they're building for him. But I do think Bam Bam deserves a bit better than that as well, and I hope ECW finds something else to do for him, but I'm not hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, I think in part it may be a case of, but I think Bam Bam is still under contract with WWF, and the viewpoint is that he can't go and work for WCW. I don't know how that would necessarily apply to commits in Japan, but maybe it's a thought of when Bam Bam's WWF contract expires, he may go somewhere else, so let's get out of him what we can, rather than necessarily pushing him to the hills and then him going somewhere else, I guess. Steve?
Yeah, I've got no problem actually with Bam Bam being used like this in the short term, if that's what it ends up being. I quite like Bam Bam as a worker. I think he's a solid sort of guy and he can get people over, and I did laugh at the Lawrence Taylor jibe. I thought that was quite good.
March the 19th, Hardcore TV is largely reruns from Big Ass Extreme Bash. We do get highlights from the Mysterio Guerrero match from New York, which is as brutal as you'd expect. Guerrero wins that one, 2 out of 3 falls off the top. We end the show with Chef Pillman waiting to serve WCW attorney Mr. Jester his salad. Pillman spits in it. Later we return to the restaurant. Pillman signs an autograph for a fan and says, "It's all just a work, you know." March 26th opens up with a brawl filmed on fan cam by a concession stand. Tommy Dreamer gets thrown through a door by one of the Bruise Brothers. Joey Styles makes Digger uncensored. The door, now off its hinges, gets snapped in two. One of the Bruise Brothers gets thrown through it by Tommy. We get highlights of Mikey from Cactus for the Philly show, followed by clips of his post-match promo and a documentary, documenting his run with promotion. The graphic reads Cactus Jack, 1985 to 1996. Bang, bang, he's dead. We get a rerun of Taz and Chris Jericho. We then get the ECW Fan of the Week segment. This week it's anyone with an ECW with a smidgen of decision-making responsibility. Obviously these brain surgeons have far too much time on their hands, so they're watching ECW, trying to copy us for their unsalvageable pay-per-views, which they should censor. Bottom line, you guys really suck. We then get a video package looking at the past history between Douglas, Sandman and Dreamer and trying to guess if they can get along. We then get Douglas and Raven from Big Ass Extreme Bash. That will bring to a conclusion this month's show, but a quick story to finish. You may have heard us reference on shows in the past the whole thing with Paul Heyman and ECW and Dennis Corleone in the Northeast. Well, apparently a story kind of came to light this month. A challenge laid down. Eugene Moore, who's an associate of called Loser, Moore went nuts on a radio show and issued a champion versus champion challenge, with each group sending its champion into a shoot cage match with security around the ring, preventing interference, with $250,000 for the winner and the losing group never being able to promote wrestling again. Obviously, this was just a challenge and not anything that Paul Heyman was ever likely to accept. But the reason that one of the reasons he wasn't going to accept it was that at the time Paul Heyman's champion was Sandman. And at the time, and still, the NWA champion is Dan Severn, who you may have heard us discuss on the UFC shows in the last few months, i.e. MMA star Dan Severn. Yes, that was really an idea. Can you imagine Sandman in a shoot match with Dan Severn?
Oh, can we please let that happen?
Well, maybe. Anyway, suffice to say, Paul Heyman did not answer the challenge.
No.
Anyway, that will wrap up this month's show. Firstly, thank you to Steve Halvorsen. Steve, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Steve, you can be found on Twitter.
I can. Yeah. That's uncredited bit part. I'm there.
There we go. And Rory McNamara.
Thanks, fellas.
Rory, again, coming in as our saving grace as a super sub on 2 days' notice. That very much appreciated. Rory, you can be found on Twitter.
Yep, I'm on there as RorsDM, RORSDM.
Splendid. Anyway, that will wrap up this month's show. 2 other volumes for you. It's quite possible you've already heard them yet. We've not taped either of them. Volume 1 is WrestleMania, covering WWF show covering WrestleMania. Volume 2 is the WCW show covering Uncensored. I had the pleasure of watching that show last night. I'm looking forward to reviewing it next week. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter at Bamber. You can find all the information you need on Wrestling20YRS.com. If you're on iTunes, leave us a rating and a review. RSS feeds. We now got a page on the website dedicated to the MMA show. I'm hoping to work on that over the next few weeks. Trying to get an MMA specific podcast feed for people who just want that, but I'll mention more of that when we get back to UFC in May. But anyway, that will do that. I've been Bob Bamber. This has been Volume 3 of the March 1996 edition of the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. And until next time, goodbye.